Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation and entrepreneurship. My name is Steve Glaveski, and each week I'll bring you authors, corporate innovation managers, entrepreneurs, and above all else, thought leaders on the topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you successfully navigate your innovation journey. Every Monday, I'll bring you a world-class thought leader such as Steve Blank, Alex Osterwalder, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, or Whitney Johnson, just to name a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you some quick digestible insights myself to help end your week on a high before you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is proudly brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub, school and consultancy that works with large organizations to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies and tools required to explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. If your organization needs support coming up with ideas, testing and turning those ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit Collective Campus online at www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared for a very exciting episode. Today I'm hosting Summer Howarth. She is first and foremost a teacher with an unwavering belief in the potential of young adolescents and those who work in support of them. Summer has drive for and proven success in unleashing and spreading teacher-led innovations and has been an instrumental leader in Australia's contribution to the OECD work on student engagement and Australia's TeachMeet movement. She's deeply and unashamedly passionate and makes it her business to connect with anyone who pursues interest in improving the life and learning outcomes of young people. Summer has worked in every corner of the education scene from school to university and government and holds a Paul Harris Fellowship for her services to education. In her role as National Director of Learning for Education Changemakers, Summer works with teachers, students and community leaders to solve our toughest education challenges, turning good schools into great ones. While the focus of her work is across Australia, Summer has also taught in the USA and worked with students, teachers and principals across the world. Former executive member of Adolescent Success, Summer is a sought-after advisor and facilitator, but quite simply loves kids, teachers and the teaching profession, and works to make sure everyone else does too. So with that, it gives me much pleasure to introduce Summer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's quite the introduction.
Well, it is quite the introduction and I totally ripped it off your LinkedIn profile.
There you go. Maybe something that I'll have to update and
make
it a little more simple.
Look, I think that's an awesome profile. So look, I've given the audience a bit of a high-level background overview, but look, I think it makes more sense to hear it from yourself. So tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you came to become involved in Education Changemakers and do the kind of work you're doing today.
Sure. So I, as that bio did say, will always be a teacher, and one of the biggest advocates for the profession. I'm that person that turns up to a barbecue or gets into a conversation and people start to roll their eyes because I'll always be pitching why school is the very best place anyone can spend their day. But in my role at EC, it became apparent pretty early in my career that building the capacity of teachers was something that I was always really interested in. And that really became because I wanted to share a lot of the great stories that were emerging from my classroom. So TeachMeet was a really interesting example where we looked at what wasn't working for us in professional learning as a group of teachers in Sydney. We looked across the world to what else was sort of working that was a bit different to the conference scene, and decided that talking to teachers about teaching was where it was at. And TeachMeet has really gone to scale across Australia, and certainly was a model borrowed from the UK. So it was in that sort of growth of building teacher capacity that I got into a conversation at a conference around emerging leaders. There was 100 emerging leaders in education brought together. Dave Faulkner was there, Aaron Tate was there, Luca Parry was there, and we all started talking shop. And sort of fast forward 5 years later, and all of us are immersed in this privileged work that we do in building teacher capacity, finding great teachers and helping them do their job better.
Yeah, so you guys have all come together under the banner of Education Changemakers, which is all about unleashing teacher-led innovation. So for those in our audience who aren't familiar with EC, tell us a little bit about the organisation.
Cool. So EC was really started to identify people who were wanting to move into leadership and almost accelerate those pathways. But EC is so much more than that now. There's professional learning that we do. We build capacity of teachers across systems in Australia. So we do work with some individual schools, but largely we will work at that sort of system level. We also work with new teachers, and we do innovation upskill and uplift through a range of short courses. Education Changemakers designs great learning as well. Some of our examples would be working alongside Victoria Police, where we have looked at how every opportunity can be a learning opportunity to embed human rights at the core of everything. Yeah. That's been a really brilliant piece of work that we continue to work with them on. So unleashing innovation across public service as well is something we've moved into. And great events is a really important part of that, bringing together the tribe of people that I identifying with wanting to make change in education. So essentially, I guess there's four things within the EC banner. There's great professional learning, there's brilliant learning design and events, there's our EC labs, which also finds brilliant startups in the K-12 education space, accelerates and incubates them, and EC community as well. It's a carefully and deliberately curated network of educators and those that want to support them to make change. So there's really four facets of what we do.
Fantastic. And so you've got the learning, events, EC labs, and the broader community of Education Changemakers. And I was fortunate enough to come along to EC16 earlier this year over at NAB Village in Melbourne, which brought together, Education Changemakers from across the country, and I got to meet people from remote parts of Australia who are looking to drive change in remote parts of Australia. And I guess it was inspiring to see that so many people share this belief. And it's funny that you mentioned Victoria Police and the public service, because oftentimes when I'm talking to people about schools and unleashing innovation in schools, I find a lot of similarities with large organizations and the public service, where there's these entrenched values, systems, processes, and KPIs dating back to the 20th century, which all fly in the face of experimentation, change, entrepreneurship. So I guess if I'm a teacher at a school where we have these entrenched values, but I see that we need to be changing, and the way we're doing things may definitely generate value, but it could be doing way more. What's your advice for someone like that?
It's a really interesting question, and I think it is one that we want to tackle, because the reality is 1 in 2 teachers will leave in their first 5 years if they don't feel like they've got that support or
1 in 2
efficacy.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a high attrition rate. So I think some advice is definitely there's so much autonomy in a classroom space. And while I'm not advocating to go alone, quite often we can get caught up in what's my big change to change the world, when there's 15, 20, 30 kids in front of you that want you to be the very best that you can for them in that day. That's really important advice. Enjoy your work, tinker with your lessons and the way that you work, and load that demand side so that the kids that you teach start to demand the kind of education that you're providing to other teachers, to the leadership of the school, and be that snowflake that causes the avalanche. My second piece of advice would be join communities and make teacher friends outside of your school. See what other people are doing, hang out with like-minded change makers, and get your energy from there if you need to. We've got a big enough profession with all sorts of people doing snazzy things. Make friends with people that are on your same wavelength and share your vibe.
100%. Absolutely love that. And I love the analogy snowflake to avalanche. It's much nicer than my analogy, which is bonfire to bushfire. So
I like that though.
No. I'm going to use yours from now, if I may. It's just a lot easier on the ear. Sure. But you mentioned that if a teacher wants to start driving change, that they should just start tinkering. And I guess keen to explore whether some stories in that space that you've come across of teachers, and what kind of experiments can someone just run? What have you seen work well in that sort of setting?
Yeah, look, some of the greatest tangible examples of change that I've seen that are sort of very small scale, if I'm looking at that example you offered of maybe a school that is really entrenched in the way we've always done it, or maybe still has a high value on external examination. There are so many pressures across every school, so by no means am I making criticisms there, but obviously there's that tension of achievement and improvement, or innovation and improvement. I think that the physical classroom space is something that can always be manipulated. To have a look at brilliant examples across the world, or I encourage teachers to go out and think about where you like to hang out and relax and do work, replicate that in your classrooms. I worked with a teacher in Singapore, and he had this reading corner, and there was a kettle and tea bags and bean bags, and of course, Steve, you know that I will push the envelope wherever I go, but I'm thinking, there's a kettle with boiling hot water in the corner of a classroom. He said, well, when I read, I want to make a cup of tea, and I want my kids to read. And he said the kettle has been one of the most pivotal things in allowing kids the autonomy and the time and the space and the trust to sit down and manage their own learning. So that really shifted the way that whole middle school then started to think about using their classroom spaces. So that's just one example, but there's anything from rethinking how it is we set up the rules and the values in the classroom. There's ways that we might look at the timetable to utilise the experts and the skills of kids. So there might be You Teach Me Fridays. There's so many different concepts. We've got a site where we're sort of curating them, ecideas.org, and putting the best of these concepts so that might take an idea out of the box and scale it. But brilliant things happening across the country and the world. Yeah,
so you've touched on a number of interesting points there. Most recently with the crowdsourcing open sourcing the ideas and experiments that teachers are running, I think is really important. If everybody's you could be working on your own, you could feel isolated out in Wagga Wagga in some school that has perhaps entrenched values, but you've got access to this database of experiments and teachers across the country as part of the EC community. That's only going to ensure that everybody learns, but can run these experiments and then share the results with everyone else in the community.
I think that it is imperative to share what we're working on. I think when we know better, we do better, and teaching is a tough gig. There's a lot of challenges every day, so it's not that people don't want to get better at their practice. Often it's I don't even know where to start, and that's where EC really has that point of difference in being the how of innovation. So we're not talking about why we should innovate or what we should innovate around. Teachers know that, they're clever people, but often it's that how do I get started, and what are other people just like me doing. We will often use the concepts from Stephen Johnson of this idea of when clever people share what they're working on, the rate of innovation accelerates, and then we all win. If I look at a whole other profession and think about the medical profession, if a doctor somewhere in the world found a cure for cancer, then it's their professional imperative to share that. They wouldn't just cure their own patients, they'd want to shout it from the rooftops. When we find stuff that works for kids and improving their outcomes, we should do the same. It's important.
And I think we're seeing that move to collaboration, not just in education, but across every industry. With technology moving as quickly as it is, there's no longer room or time for organizations to just sit back and take their time on 5-year plans, because 5 years is a long time today. So what we're seeing is, I came across a case study the other night where Cisco was working with, I believe it was FedEx and Dell, and all these different organizations were coming together, but bringing their unique insights to the table. Sorry, it wasn't Dell, it was DHL. No, it wasn't FedEx, it was DHL, Cisco, and GE, I believe.
Some really cool organizations.
Really big organizations, but all excelling in their own parts of the world. But coming together, they can just create so much more value than they could working alone. And the same goes for in the education space. It's not just about schools, but schools, governments, social enterprise, startups coming together, working together, and leveraging their unique skill sets. teachers have the domain expertise. They're in the trenches every day.
Yeah.
But perhaps they can't move as quickly as they'd like. And by partnering with some of the startups out there who can move quickly, can experiment, can #get shit done, together they can actually create a lot more value. So what have you seen in that space in terms of collaborations between different facets of the ecosystem?
Yeah, oh gosh, lots and lots of different collaborations. I think one of my favourite collaborations at the moment, PwC is really getting involved in the education space and really supporting some STEM initiatives. So understanding that concept that actually teachers, while they have huge content knowledge and subject-specific domain intelligence, they've got the lives of young people in their hands every day as well. So quite often if I look back at my muscle memory of teaching, you've got all of these great plans for these brilliant lessons that really target key curriculum points, and then a kid comes in whose life has just fallen apart in front of them, and I'm not going to push a curriculum agenda on that child. So to have partners in the ecosystem that say, hey, you look after the well-being and outcomes of young people, will support you in creating these amazing opportunities within that curriculum domain to really support you in doing your job better. I think that's a brilliant collaboration. A really other tangible one that actually came out of this building that we're podcasting in at the moment, and it came out of Startup Weekend a couple of years ago, is Code the Future. So we've got a coder and somebody that's really in that sort of space and doing a lot in the coding space, and you've got a teacher who sees this opportunity where there's teachers that want to be brilliant at coding, and there's this initiative in school, get kids to code, and you've got a whole lot of teachers going, far out, like I have no idea how to code myself, how could I even teach it? So they basically match up. There are teachers and principals that want these ideas, and there are all of these coders and very clever people in the community that would love to give their time and expertise. And they're basically like a brokering or a matching service. And I think that they're doing some brilliant things.
I think they've set themselves a target of 10,000 kids by, if I'm not mistaken, the end of the year, or something like that. So, and that's pretty incredible for something that just was hatched 2 years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's the epitome, that is teachers leading innovation, and that's them putting themselves in spaces, and organisations like yours providing these opportunities and the time and the space to get those people together. I think that's a major challenge, is what are the opportunities that you and me and others like us can create so that clever people can be in a room and start conversations that matter, and things like Code the Future are born. And taking the actual step beyond the conversation and actually doing something about it, I think is the key thing as well. And that's what we're seeing where you mentioned teachers, they're bright people, they've got a passion for children, they want to see children succeed and be empowered and so on, but they don't know oftentimes how to get started. They've not traditionally been entrepreneurs, they don't know the whole concept of what are your assumptions, let's build an experiment, let's test that, what did we learn, let's move quickly and try different things. And oftentimes I guess people in organizations are scared of failure, especially in schools, and therefore they don't want to do something just in case it makes them look bad if it doesn't work. Whereas in the entrepreneurship world we realize, hey, we embrace failure, but it's about failing small and learning from that and improving. Yes, I would probably challenge that in saying I think that teachers aren't afraid of failure. I mean, the failure happens every day in school. I just think that there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot of different stakeholders. We don't want to fail kids. Failing actually sucks.
Of course.
Whether you're in business or whether you're in school. So it's not the case that we want to build failure out, but we want to be thinking around, so how do we know then what's great and what works is really working? Failure lets us see the mountains and the valleys kind of perspective of that. We know that mountain is really high because this valley is really low. We have I think across education and probably those major sort of service industries a tendency to pilot more than prototype. We will look at, say, curriculum and we'll pilot it for a year and then it's sort of entrenched and embedded. So it is breaking out of that concept and saying, look, let's just do some small small concepts, some agile methodology to take that into the tech world and really build up from there. Teachers are passionate about improving outcomes of kids. They're passionate about their subject areas as well. Quite often where there can be that sort of challenge is, well, how might I innovate around systems? How might I innovate around the kinds of environment that's going to let these good ideas flourish? So I think with having that clear process and that clear language of this is how we now design learning, and design thinking is obviously embedded into that, and all of these concepts that we talk about, that's going to change the DNA of teaching and schooling. Moreover, and that's the exciting part.
That is very exciting. And I mean, you touched on the fact that there's lots of different stakeholders when it comes to the education system. It's not just internal; it's also, it starts at home, right? With parents. And we can do everything in our power within the schools to change things. But oftentimes our key stakeholder, the person that we're responsible to, is the child's parent, right? We're accountable to them. So if you're dealing with parents who I suppose have a very specific view of the world, who believe that education should be what they not knew it to be growing up, and if there's change, well, why are you teaching them this stuff? Why are you teaching them like this? And that parent purely wants that child to just get the grades so they can get the degree, so that they can get the job.
Which is so rational.
It's so rational. But at the same time, the world is changing. So, I mean, how have you seen that play out in terms of the broader education piece with the parents?
It's a great question. And having some of, my friends who are now having children and are very clever entrepreneurial people, and then somehow they've got this child and they're like paralyzed with just what you were saying of, but I want to ensure that they get the best marks or the best opportunities. I mean, which parent doesn't want best opportunities? And another point you touched on, you went to school, I went to school, we turned out just fine,
we think.
Ish, getting there every day. What is it that essentially needs to change and what needs to stay? So it's looking at what are the pain points of schooling and what is it that we could have those conversations around with parents. The fact is that school has a very confusing bullseye customer. Is it the student? Is it the parent? Is it the community? So having those conversations around what does school look like? What does schooling feel like? An example from one of our Changemakers, the nature of school looked different. Big building project, big open plan spaces that were replicating these kind of co-working spaces that people are coming and working in now. She kind of gave some kids like some GoPro cameras, and they basically wore them around for a week. She made it into a short video and gave it to her parents and said, this is what a school day feels like now. It's not scary, and took away any of that sort of fear factor. So that was a really great way of winning them on board as well. There are schools that are bringing parents in to do learning on site and upskill them in the kinds of vocations and professions that they want to get involved in. It is tricky. I think it's very much around equipping young people with the language of their own learning so that they can go home and talk about what happened at school today, over and above what is expected happened at school today. And I love that example of the GoPro, because oftentimes when it comes to winning buy-in, it's way more effective when you show, not tell. Show, don't tell is my mantra when it comes to buy-in, because being told is never enough. But if you can see, feel, hear, immerse yourself in something, it's way easier to see things from the other person's perspective and actually support their idea. Interesting. And I guess we've touched on a few things. We've touched on the collaboration aspect, we've touched on schools, parents, and I know you've got some interesting or some fascinating stories when it comes to student-led innovation within schools. What can you tell us there? Oh, look, when you empower young people with a process, they absolutely come to life. We've worked mainly with teachers at EC. I mean, obviously, we've all been teachers, so we've worked with thousands of kids in our career. But some amazing things come out when teachers and students also co-design some pathways. Obviously, there are some really great examples like Taj up in Queensland with, the 56. So he's looking at one-to-one device for every child across Australia and the world, and not just pulling them out of a box, but they're in pieces, and then you learn to put them together and you code. And so he's really changing the game. And I was looking for a time that we could connect just the other day about something we're working on. And, you forget, he said, oh, look, I've got my end of year exams coming up. And you think, you're talking with a 16, 17-year-old student, and they are doing immense things and have that environment of support. We've worked with kids in the ACT, who have done extraordinary things in changing the health outcomes of their communities by looking at a problem and going and solving it. So the kids at Lanyon High with Brekkie Bar, they looked at the problem of their community had been labelled the fattest and laziest in the ACT. Wow. They found that unacceptable. We introduced them to a process of thinking like a designer. We asked them to challenge some of those assumptions, and those kids came up with the idea of, alongside their teachers, let's put a brekkie bar in. It's got smoothies, it's got muffins. It sounds simple to you and I, but these kids actually prototyped 16 times until they had a solid product, and they were able to then go ahead and challenge some of the big catering companies that were around them for the tender of the canteen. When you start to unleash, they then start to ask, well, what other problems could I identify and solve? And that's the sort of questions that we want to hear from kids. Having these young people who are on the phone to me as early as this week, I'm about to graduate, and I've got this idea of what if there are all of these problems in the world to solve, and a whole bunch of young people about to graduate who want to solve them. How could we create a matching service for social change that we want to see in the world? And then it's our responsibility as adults who play in this space to find people that will want to bring those ideas to life.
And I think that's a very critical point you've raised around student-led and teacher-led innovation and empowering them with these tools, because nobody knows their environment, their customer journey, if you want to call it that, better than they do, and then they can come up with much better solutions than people on the outside looking in can.
Absolutely.
So I guess for startups on the outside who are looking to get into this space, what should they be thinking about, and who should they be connecting with to, I suppose, reach mutually beneficial outcomes?
That's a brilliant question. Look, I think to be able to have a clear idea as a startup of the problem that you're solving, and to have that as an opening into conversations with schools, there's nothing more powerful than being locally focused and talking to your local schools around how your skill set might help support what their schools are doing. But I think things like the community, EC community, is a pretty significant starting point, and it's really looking at how is it that we can support teachers to do their job better. It's why EC was formed in the first place. You talked about that idea of it's not solutions from the outside, but it's actually networks of support, of tools and of resources and of expertise that positions the school and the teacher as being able to identify and solve their own challenges. We work in a lot of remote schools, and this idea of people coming into community, making the changes and leaving, that's ridiculous and will never work at all. So I think for startups wanting to get into the education space, it's being very aware and cognizant of the fact that kids are going to catch onto a process far quicker than any of us. They are willing to take those risks and break things and start again and try again. But that teaching is a complex team sport as well. That there are certain expertise sets, and schools don't need saving, but what they need is support to be brave to make those next steps into the kinds of realities that maybe you and I have a little bit more of a lens into outside of school world. It's working really well. We're seeing schools in New Zealand where they're opening up co-working spaces right within their school and offering expertise in their process and what they're finding and in return getting a space to work. So I think there are creative collaborations that could be made if you're looking at what's the mutual value proposition for students, for the startup in their growth and in their markets, and being really clever about how is this going to push both organisations forward.
Yeah, absolutely love that idea of a co-working space within a school where startups and schools basically come together and share their unique insights. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a fantastic platform to collaborate.
Yeah.
And I guess on the entrepreneurship piece, I mean, as you're aware, we run the Lemonade Stand program, all about empowering children's entrepreneurship. And for me, one of the big things that I find with entrepreneurship and kids is that today, especially in today's climate where kids look for validation in a lot of the wrong places. I mean, they always have, go back 20 years, it was let's hang out with the cool kids and smoke and drink and all that sort of stuff. Today, we see it in the form of social media. The manifestation, I guess, is, well, I want to get more likes than everyone else.
Right.
And that means I'm adequate, right?
Yeah.
But through entrepreneurship, through getting kids to build their own ideas and put them out into the world and get people from all over the world to, for example, visit their website and start interacting, I find that's a great source of validation, and it's a much healthier source. So what's your view on children's entrepreneurship?
Well, I think you nailed it there. It's this idea of self-belief and that I'm here to make a difference. I think when we look at a lot of the social media postings, whether it's probably more kind of an Instagram, Snapchat kind of thing at the moment, I think they're surfing that wave. It's that presence of like, I'm here, notice me, please, I'm valid in this world. Yeah. And that pathway of entrepreneurship is really ageless. You can start when you are 70 or 7 years old, as long as you are solving a problem that people go, oh wow, that actually makes my life better. Yeah. So, because essentially it's the same kind of thing. We want to drive traffic to our different websites. We want to get likes on social media, etc. Because we've got a slightly different bent on it though, to say, look, our organisation is here. These are the people that populate that organisation. If I look at EC and our community or Change Week, do I want people to come along to Change Week? Absolutely. Yep. Why? Because I know the weight of when very cool people are in a room, very cool things happen. But essentially, I'm saying, hey, we're sort of solving this problem or having a go at it. We'd love it if you identified with that. Student-led entrepreneurship and the stuff you guys are doing with Lemonade Stand, it just gives that idea of it's not about me, it's about the impact I'm having and about the problem I'm solving. And so kids flourish when they feel like they're making a difference, and they flourish tenfold when they feel like somebody is noticing and essentially saying, if you weren't here working on this, we'd all be a little bit worse off. I actually think we should not underestimate this role of student entrepreneurship in student well-being. I'd like to see a world where it wasn't just a nice option or a nice program that some kids did, that every child had the opportunity to solve a problem and start something and be self-sufficient and have that sense of efficacy as early as they wanted. Definitely.
And we've had kids as young as 7 come through the program and build prototypes and put them into the interwebs and whatnot. And I like what you mentioned there about kids wanting to give back at such a young age. And we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs a lot on this podcast, and we talk
now
about,
you're talking my language.
But not many people know that after he released the first variation of the hierarchy, the very top was self-fulfillment, but then it became more about transcendence and giving back. And I think today's kids, because obviously not in all economies, not in all socioeconomic brackets, but a very large majority of children today, they've got the basics covered, right? So they want to start giving back, and we see that with kids coming through the program. What problems do they want to solve? It's usually they want to make the environment better. They want to end poverty, end homelessness, all that type of stuff. It's not so much we want to build a better candy bar that flies or something.
Hey, that's
flying candy bar. Maybe it finds you. It's got like AI.
Well, are we going to start ideating here? Because we can do this.
We could totally go crazy.
I love it. Uber's got to get involved somehow.
Uber Eats me. It's a flying candy bar.
Well, like drone candy. Could the drone be made of candy?
Could the drone be made of candy? Perhaps,
drones.
and perhaps the drone would shoot chocolate sauce onto the street. Random intervals.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll take this one off air.
Well,
and
yeah,
just keep
that's
that one.
yes. Anyways, but where was I going with that? So
I think it's the process of that.
Yes.
Those solving those problems can lead you to this idea too. I mean that is a tangential conversation, and we had a lot of fun doing that.
Exactly, but the one thing we didn't do in that conversation was judge and not vocally express, oh, that's a terrible idea.
Right.
Because by going through that process of what about this and what about that, we eventually come up with something good. And that's one of the things about entrepreneurship that can build that growth mindset in kids.
Yeah.
Rather than just shooting down the first idea, we realize that, hey, we can build something or we can share it with other people.
Yeah.
And by sharing it, they might say that, hey, that's okay, but have you thought about this? And have you thought about that? And by sharing, we're far more likely to create something valuable. And by having the guts to put something out into the World Wide Web and face the potential rejection, but frame that rejection as an opportunity to learn and get better. Super valuable.
I think you're right there in when you're putting it out there, when you say, okay, like this candy drone is going to change the world.
Yeah.
And you get, one person like me saying, I'm with you, yes. Or you get 20 others that are like, oh, maybe. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? You're so right in saying, I'm putting that out into the world and I know it's probably going to be a sucky idea, but I wonder what the next idea it might trigger for me or somebody else might bring in.
Yeah.
The possibilities of that are endless. And they then very quickly get into this idea of, isn't life better when it's lived with others, when I'm sharing my ideas with others?
Yeah.
And this, I even think the idea of, is it entrepreneurship or is it starting at this idea of that I've got the language of making change, and then we can start to conceptualize, well, how could that be tangibly like some kind of job title for you? People like Trump have given entrepreneurship such a bad rap.
Yeah.
And it was actually came from a student not too long ago who said, I don't know if I want to be a social entrepreneur. I just want to make the world a better place. And you think that's pretty stunning. You can call it whatever you like, but as long as the essence of what we're trying to do in this entrepreneurial space makes people believe that the world could be better and I'm somebody that could do something about that, call it whatever you like.
Definitely. Yeah, and there's no reason why kids as young as 7 can't do this today, because the barriers to entry are just so low. Growing up, when we were going through primary school, it would have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a business that reached the world, if not 7 figures, right? Whereas today, internet connection is all you need. I talk about how kids today with an internet connection have access to more information than Bill Clinton did when he was in the White House, right?
What an amazing stat.
Great time to be a kid. So the opportunities are there. It's about showing them how, giving them that self-belief and showing them that, hey, it's okay to fail and learn and pick yourself up.
It's very, very true. And I think that there's something as well that we need to touch on when you're looking at the school base there, because quite often we might say, oh, go and do this program and then get back to your schooling. When when you light that fire, it's very, very hard to stop it from being a bonfire into a bushfire. So often I'll talk to teachers and students about the concept of an edupreneur is somebody that looks at issues in education and wants to shift them. But more so than that, the concept of being an intrapreneur. What's the changes you can make within the system or within this organisation that maybe you then don't feel like you've got to wait for something else. I've got to wait till I finish school, or if I'm a teacher, I've got to wait for another career opportunity. When you think in an entrepreneurial mindset and maybe even identify those intrapreneurial concepts, gosh, we've seen people come to life, back to life within their profession, within their studies. Kids in year 9 who feel like, oh, finishing school is so far away, feel like, no, I'm cool, I've got this, I can operate within this situation or system or context I find myself in.
Definitely, and I think it's key to remember that it will never be the right time.
Yeah,
and
it never is.
People listening can't see my fingers right now, but quote, end quote, the right time.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You'll always be a little bit tired, or there'll always be not enough resources, or there'll always be somebody saying no. But I love that Friedrich Nietzsche quote. And Aaron Tate, our co-founder, is always reminding us of it. The one who has a why to live by can bear almost any how.
Yeah.
And we take that further at EC and say your why should make you cry. It should be something that it doesn't matter what you're up against, that every day you fight a little bit. Sometimes you fight a lot. And fight in the way of often it's against yourself. Get out of bed, come on, you can do this. Fighting others, choosing your battles, but knowing that when you're doing great work that you care deeply about and other people are doing work they care deeply about, that maybe that work will intersect and change the world.
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs who said something along the lines of, if he was to wake up 3 days in a row and not want to do what he was doing that day, he needs to make some sort of change.
Definitely.
And if your why is great enough, if your why makes you cry, then you won't say, no, I don't want to do this, because it's something you truly believe in, something that inspires you to get up, jump out of bed in the morning and just go and do it.
Absolutely.
Drive that change.
Absolutely. I opened our conversation in saying, I think that teaching is the best job in the world. And I think that school is the best place where anybody could spend their day. And so I love this idea that startups and people like, yourself with Lemonade Stand and others are going into schools and hanging out with my friends and hanging out with kids and going, oh, how is it that we could, break that part of school that's always been like that? And I'm seeing teachers do incredible things within school, and I just want to shout that from the rooftops. And so that whole idea of that every child deserves a great teacher, and every school deserves great leadership, and importantly, every community deserves a great school. Like every child needs to be successful in an education that is worth having for them in their context. That makes me want to grit my teeth and punch the air. And whoever wants to come on that ride with me, brilliant. But you need to love this whole concept of school, whatever that looks like in the future. Doesn't matter. I don't care if that's buildings or online or whatever, but a whole bunch of young people and a whole bunch of clever adults getting together to learn every day. That's cool. That's a fantastic point to finish up on the formalities with. So, but before we do wrap up, we do have our customary lightning round. So, are you ready for our lightning round, Summer? Look, I'm as ready as I'll ever be. There's never a right time for
There is never a right time.
Or lightning rounds.
There's never a right time. Okay, so let's do this. So, with 3 questions, 2 hypotheticals, and 1 on lifestyle design. So, the first question is, if you could work for any company at any stage of the company life cycle, and you're not allowed to say Education Changemakers.
Oh, come on. You set me up for failure. I was like, this is easy.
Who would it be and why?
Any company, anywhere.
At any stage.
At any stage.
So it could be like Apple in 1978 or...
Yeah, right. Okay. I think that I would have liked to have worked at Zappos.
Right.
Right. I reckon I would have wanted to have been the 4th hire. So that I could have been on that cutting edge in those conversations to be like, well, we sell shoes, but what could we sell that's more important? And at that kind of point where it was, let's deliver happy and let's come up with a whole range of values. So I think that would have been a really fun time to have worked there.
Yeah, I take it you've read Delivering Happiness?
I hung out with Will Young and the Zappos team over in San Fran last year, I think it was. Anyway, super cool people, live their values. And I just thought, what a moment in time that would have been. Yeah,
and I love their, I always use their prototype as a case study as to how light and low fidelity you can actually be when testing your idea. The way they started testing the online shoe store was essentially, well, let's put these shoes up, and then if someone buys them, let's go to the local shoe store, buy them, wrap them up, and send them ourselves. They didn't have any inventory. They just wanted to test whether people would buy the shoes online.
I really like that, and I think that sort of started with our conference series a few years ago as well, and now, it's huge. It's turned into Edu Change Week, but it was very similar in that way. Who might want to come and hang out with us? And we've since learned thousands of people.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool indeed. Okay, so question number 2 is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
I feel like I might get a little sentimental here.
Okay.
But it would probably be my granddad.
Okay.
Pa died really suddenly when I was in year 12. And we were really close. The last time I saw my pa, I was, in the writing hovel of some kind of history or English essay.
Yeah.
And he came in and said, "I won't disturb you, but I'm so proud of you, and I know that you're going to do good things. Like, call me after your exams." And I would probably ask him, like, what do you reckon?
What do you reckon?
How do you think these things are going? He was an engineer and a quarryman and built his own tools by hand. And I think, I would ask him about, what do you think of the world at the moment? What do you think we need to do better? Yeah,
I often, and that is a great question. I can definitely a sense of sentimentality.
Yeah.
But yeah, I often ponder that as well with people, loved ones that I know who've passed away, what they would make of the world today.
Yeah.
Because when they did pass, it was quite a different world.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with Mum when it's quite a funny thing with Pa, when we all started wearing Havianas, buying our $15 rubber thongs. Said, your granddad would have. He would say, "What is this all about?" And I wonder what else he would say. What is this all about? Yeah. iPhones and touchscreens and all sorts. A man who made his own tools. Yeah. What would he think?
Definitely. Look, I still love my Pac-Man Havianas, just for the record. And the last question is, we talked about jumping out of bed with springing your step in the morning. Do you have any rituals or routines to help you stay on top of your game, Summer?
Rituals and routines. Look, I've got lots.
Pick 3.
Rituals and routines to get me out of bed. I will always sit on the couch and have my breakfast, like, uninterrupted. Yeah. I will always have, like, my berries on one side, my granola down the middle, and my yogurt on one side. So I feel like I'm in a cafe. Little bit. No, I just like to feel like I'm eating Instagram, that kind of thing. Other rituals to keep on top of things. Definitely checking in with home every day. I live away from home, and so whether it be via a quick email, a text, whatever, I have this mantra of, like, check in with home.
So you're a Sydney girl originally?
I'm a Sydney girl originally, yep. So that could be in a multitude of ways. But, like, at a really boring level, Steve, I take my vitamins every day.
I'm all about the Swiss men's Ultivite.
Yeah, I take, my vitamin D, my fish oil, and, all of those sorts of mantras, particularly because I'm on the road a lot. Yeah. Travelled to over sort of 28 locations in the past year and a half. Yeah. And that can be incredibly taxing. So you've really got to take those moments of looking after yourself first. And I know that things are getting a little out of control in my life if I find myself on social media too much. If I'm tempted to be scrolling through Instagram, that's a little bit of a check-in for me to be like, just stop. And I've actually got some friends that say, when you tweet like a storm, we know to check back in with you as well. So a good litmus test for me is, if I'm not compelled to tweet it, I'm probably doing okay. Yeah.
Well, you are quite influential in the Twitterverse as well, here in Australia in the education space. Yeah. So, it is good to have those check-ins as well.
Yeah, definitely. And sleep. I think too much we glorify, I'm running on 2 hours and 5 coffees. Yeah. Nobody takes my sleep away. Yeah. No, nobody.
It's not sustainable. And it does come back to that, the trilogy of, nutrition, exercise, sleep at its core. Yeah. That hasn't changed, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Look, you've been an amazing guest, Summer. This is your opportunity now to tell us where people can find out a little bit more about EduC, EC Week next year, and find out how to connect with yourself.
Great. So it would be brilliant to hang out with anybody that's connected in with this conversation. The first port of call is educationchangemakers.com, and you can find me on Twitter at edusum. But we would love to see you at EduChange Week. It is just at educhange.com.au, and all of the noise will be made through our Twitter accounts at EduChangemakers as well. EduChange Week is going to be the most dynamic, diverse, exciting gathering of people who want to make change in education. We've already got thousands of people that have said we want to be a part of this. So it's expect different. Think about this. The Royal Exhibition building here in Melbourne was built in the 1900s to house the World Fair. And that was the biggest showcasing of innovation, of values, of products, of ideas, and it bent the history and trajectory of Melbourne forever. So we're asking the big question of, if we house EduChange Week, the biggest week-long festival of learning and change in education in that building, how might we bend education for good?
That's beautiful. Very beautiful way to wrap up, Summer. Thank you so much for that. We'll include all of those links in the show notes for our listeners, so don't despair. You won't need to rewind. You can just check out the show notes. So thank you again. You've been an amazing guest. Any last words of wisdom for our audience?
Just remember that no snowflake ever blames itself for an avalanche. So, make that change. If you can see something that you want to be different, then be different yourself.
That's beautiful. No snowflake ever blames itself for an avalanche. Fantastic. Thanks, Summer.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for my chat with the one and only Summer Howarth. I hope and I'm sure you found that both motivational and inspirational. As always, if you're picking up what we're putting down, we would love it if you took just a minute of your time to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared on either iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo. Future Squared out.